Bruce DuMont back for hour number 2 of Beyond the Beltway. Thank you very much wherever you're joining us from coast to coast and border to border and around the world. Don't forget this is Memorial Day weekend, so we hope that you're having a safe and sane Memorial Day weekend. And we'll also realize tomorrow what the true purpose. It isn't just about barbecues and picnics. It's about those men and women who gave their lives in service to this country. So let's take a moment and remember them. If you happen to know them, if maybe they're members of your family, just take that extra time tomorrow to say a little prayer or something, or let's a discussion with someone that you remember who served this country, whether it was most recently or many, many years ago. Joining us now to share their thoughts and opinions in this hour, we welcome an independent progressive, Derek Addis, who's been a guest on this program for the last year. Derek, nice to have you back with us.
Thank you, Bruce.
Stephanie Hitt also joins us. She is a Republican. Actually, she's probably about 3 blocks away from where we're doing this show right now.
Yeah.
Nice to have you.
I could have run right over there, Bruce. I should have.
And Eric Cohen also joins us. He's become a favorite of this program, and he is a talk show host on WYND Sunday afternoon. So he is a libertarian. So thank you all for joining us. I want to pick up the discussion where we left off. And I want to start with you, Stephanie, because will you acknowledge that Donald Trump has problems with suburban women?
I will acknowledge that he does with some suburban women, but not all.
Right.
And those are, I would say that most of the women tend to be looking for a reason to lean left anyway. He certainly does not with conservative women that are of faith. He still has that support, incredibly. I think that where he's really going to struggle is maybe with the older population.
Okay, I want to go with Eric. Eric, you are a libertarian, but you've got friends who are Republicans, and you normally don't give advice to the President of the United States. But as you look at what his re-election chances are, do you think they're good or bad? And what advice would you give to him to improve them?
Well, I think at this point, they're probably about 50-50, but the advice I would give to improve them is I think a lot of that suburban women population, a lot of the general population as well, people who voted for him in 2016, who might not be coming back to him in 2020, are people who may like some of the results that they're getting. They like the economy before the pandemic. They like the Supreme Court picks. They like the judges, all of that stuff that we've heard before. They don't like his general sensibility. They don't like his attitude. They don't like the tweets. And yet here we have the president today who is tweeting absolutely insane conspiracy theories about Joe Scarborough because he needs to have an ongoing fight with the media, no matter who it is and whether or not it has a basis in reality. So I have the same advice that I would have given him in 2016, which is stop tweeting and act presidential. But, you know, it's like asking the scorpion not to sting the frog on the way across the river. He can't do it, and he will rise or fall based on how people feel about that in general.
Derek, you are an independent.
Well, I think
I'm going to get Derek. I want to get Derek to weigh in because you're unique. You are unique in that you're an independent. You're definitely progressive. You probably lean Democrat, but one of the concerns is that can Joe Biden properly energize the Democratic base? And primarily, does that mean, can he energize the Bernie supporters? And you were a Bernie supporter this year and 4 years ago.
Yeah, so that's going to be the, I wouldn't even say unfortunate circumstance. It's a bed that the Democratic establishment made for themselves as far as courting progressives and what truthfully is the ideology of the majority of the country. Because again, most people forget that only half of the country, roughly over half of the country, voted in the last presidential election.
Right.
So when we talk about Democrats or Republicans, like per se, as far as running the country, or when they say we're speaking out of interest for the American people, again, they're speaking for a half of a half. Yeah. I know but that Joe Biden...
They count. If you don't vote, you don't count. But go ahead.
No, that's fair. And in your previous segment, you know, you all had a discussion about the barriers of entry for voting for a lot of people, but also the availability of voting avenues for people as well. So as far as getting the progressive vote, I think it's fair. And I've heard otherwise from numerous blue team members. I think it's totally fair that this person, Joe Biden, still has to work for the vote of the people. He's the presumptive nominee, and it's not fair to just think you can just slam dunk votes. That's not how elections should be won.
But speak to your friends who were Bernie supporters, okay?
Hmm.
How real was the rift between Bernie supporters and Elizabeth Warren? Because there are some suggest that Elizabeth Warren would be most likely to keep the Bernie bros in place. I disagree with that, but I want to get your take on that. Would she be a turnoff to you personally and others?
I think it's a turnoff for any person to try to think that they could bestow a label upon someone and then automatically assume their mental state and where it's going to take them as far as who they choose to be their candidate. I think you're taking agency, free will, and determinism away from a human. So I think for someone like me, and I think that was kind of the crux of a lot of Bernie supporters, was that we were free thinkers. We are free thinkers. And as much as we still have thoughts that are aligned with both parties, we lie somewhere in the middle that tries to find a common ground, and or we're also willing to fight for the things we believe in. So again, I think as soon as you tell someone like, oh, well, the progressive vote's going to come because Warren was the progressive, I think you're not going to win that. You're not going to win that way.
Do you think that's correct, Eric?
I think something's interesting here, and that is as a libertarian and someone who is very conscious of the fact that not a whole heck of a lot of the population of this country agrees with me. One of the things that was interesting to me about the Democratic primary this year is how, just as Hillary Clinton did with Donald Trump and made a seemingly unelectable person electable, she made Bernie Sanders look far more electable and came far closer to the nomination, I think both times. So you really have a difference between kind of the online left and what the media covers in terms of how progressive they think the Democratic Party is. But a majority of the actual voting base of the Democratic Party is not that persuaded that a progressive candidate is the kind of person to go with. So I'm conscious that not a lot of people agree with me, and I'm also pretty aware that there just aren't as many Bernie Sanders radicals in the Democratic Party as perhaps Derek would like there to be.
All right, go, Stephanie.
Well,
I'm going to go back to Stephanie. Go ahead, weigh in.
I'd like to think that the way I sort of saw it was that Bernie look a little bit more normal or electable, but I really think that the dynamics of that Democrat primary were that way because of.
I want to interrupt. I want to interrupt you because we're looking too much in the rearview mirror here. Stephanie, I want to go to you.
Yeah.
Of the list of people who have been touted as a running mate for Joe Biden, which person, in your view, would be the most appealing to a Republican, or the absolute worst, most likely turnoff for a Republican? Give me an answer to each of them right now.
Absolute worst, Stacey Abrams.
And the best?
Most appealing? I'd have to go with I hate to say it, even though I think he could be taken out, I think Cuomo. But he's not a possibility.
And he's not a woman, and he's not a woman, and he's not going to do a sex change. Back shortly. Bruce DuMont back from Evanston, Illinois, and before the break, Stephanie Hitt was saying that she threw the name Cuomo out there, but Cuomo is a man the last time I looked, and he has said he's not interested, and I was talking about a woman. Do you want to put a woman on there that you think helps, Stephanie?
And I don't think she's in the running. As a Republican, the only woman that would scare me or make me nervous would be Hillary.
You told me that Stacey Abrams was the worst choice. I'm asking you for the best choice. You've had 3 minutes to think
Hillary.
about it. Who is it?
I think Hillary. I don't think that there's
the best choice.
Anyone
Hillary.
on his list. Yeah.
Okay, Derek, I want you to weigh in on this. First of all, he has said, Joe Biden has said it absolutely has to be a woman. So of those women, the reason I was zeroing in on you is I wanted to find out whether the cardinal sin had been created by Elizabeth Warren, and would she get your vote? But I didn't get a sense that she was a favorite of yours. So who do you want to
Yeah.
be the vice president?
Really, and again, I'm just speaking for myself. So
Of
as much as I
course, we all
appreciate you,
are.
yeah, and as much as I appreciate you having me as the voice of the Bernies, right? Really, at this point, I really think it is who's actually going to make some changes, right? I mean, everyone says the same platitudes when they're running for president or running for office. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're going to do
Derek,
that.
answer my question. We're talking about a vice president. They make no decisions. They show up for funerals. They may add a state. So answer my question. I'm looking for, of the list of people, and there's about 7 or 8 of them, who is your choice, speaking for yourself, not for Bernie, who is your choice for vice president, running with Joe Biden?
Yeah, well, I mean, if he said it has to be a woman, I mean,
I didn't say that. I didn't say that.
He said it.
He said it.
He said it. He said it. I know.
Now,
he said
did you
it.
like that idea?
I mean, obviously,
did you like it when
in
he
my
said
mind,
that?
Yeah,
did you
obviously
like
in
when
my
he
mind,
said it? Did you like when Joe Biden said that his running mate was going to be a woman? Did you think that was a smart political move? Yes or no?
I don't think so, in the sense that that she may end up not being the best person for the position, whoever she is.
So who is she, in your view? Got a long list.
Honestly, I don't know at the moment. I know that it was unfortunate. Oh, you want me to answer the question? I don't know who
Always
it is.
Always do.
But
that's my goal.
I don't.
I ask the questions. I want my guests to answer them.
Yeah.
So
I don't know who it is. But obviously, if it is going to be Warren, I need her to be the progressive Warren, not the corporatist Democrat Warren. If that makes sense.
Okay. Eric, I'm going to give you the last word on this, and then we're going to take some phone calls.
Okay, first thought. One, vice presidential picks are so incredibly overrated. People tend to attribute to them the ability to pull in a whole lot of voters, and I just don't think that we have any demonstration and evidence that is actually true. I think the worst suggestion that exists out there for who he could possibly pick is Stacey Abrams. It is the most bunker mentality inside the Beltway kind of idea that I have come across. She is of no significance. She has gained fame only because she claims that she lost an election for fraudulent reasons, that she lost for actual reasons. Picking her would be absolutely ludicrous. The best possible person he could probably pick is Amy Klobuchar, somebody who is, with all apologies to Derek, not that far to the left, because that is the reason that Joe Biden won, because he was not as far to the left as Bernie Sanders was. So somebody like her, who actually is from the Midwest, who seems to have just kind of that Midwest nice sensibility to him, is probably the smartest pick he could make.
Right.
And who could step into the job. I think the Biden nomination is a little bit different. I know several times you guys have said the VP pick isn't a lot. It's like window dressing almost. But
this is
in
the
this
most
case,
this is the
I
most
think
important one.
More so than
years.
ever.
This is the most important one in years, because you have an elderly candidate who has expressed or displayed some confusion, a little doddering. And so
and
this person, he's basically saying, this is the person I think should be president.
Right. I think that's going to go into the calculation on voters far more than it has in the past.
I agree.
And I also think I think that's why it makes Hillary the scariest, or as a Republican, the strongest choice.
I'm sorry, I just do not think that there is a large constituency of voters out there who is trying at this point weighing whether or not Joe Biden over Donald Trump, and it's going to land on whether or not they think the person he picks is really qualified to be president. The number one thing animating Democrats right now is defeating Donald Trump. Right. And they would probably go to the polls for Mickey Mouse or a ham sandwich or literally anybody who is running against Donald Trump. I wish I could agree that it is that impactful. I just do not think that it is.
Which will be
I think what we learned, what we learned in the last election, that voting against someone doesn't always work. And, people did that against Trump. And I think that
but they also did that against Hillary.
Mickey Mouse or any functioning adult, as we see, or Biden just as the, cardboard cutout, it's not going to do it. It's not going to work. Not when we see that there are real things at stake like pandemics. People are going to be a lot more serious.
I think in this particular case, I think that Biden should want to avoid the embarrassment of McCain making his first choice Sarah Palin. The base loved her, but she was not qualified to be a heartbeat away
Right.
and run the free world. And I think when you look at that long list of people that Joe Biden has there, there's but a few that may be able to fit the bill. And I do believe that Amy Klobuchar, I've said this a long time, so this is not new. I just think there would be fewer Republican women who would think about going for Donald or staying with Donald Trump if Amy Klobuchar was the running mate. That would be a signal from Biden that he is thinking ahead. He wants a woman. He wants a woman who's moderately left. And but again, the many in the black community have already said that she is she would be the worst possible choice because they didn't like her record as a federal district attorney up in federal U.S. attorney up in Minnesota.
Yeah.
We're going to take a call. Bonnie in Crown Point, Indiana. Go ahead. You're on Beyond the Beltway, Coast to Coast.
Oh, thanks for taking my call. Well, a lot of people believe that Biden is in a state of cognitive decline. So the vice president pick is probably more important than it's ever been in our history.
Right.
Now, in my world, and I'm in a business. I'm a officer in a business. I think management skills is important because this is an executive position. So a person who has always worked as a representative, I don't know if any of these women that have been put forward possess the skill set to be a good manager, which you have to be a successful president.
Well, some have been governors. Some are governors.
Right. Well, a lot of people believe that if he's elected, he will be removed based on his cognitive decline, or he will be immediately impeached. And that's if
I hope not.
the Republicans
I hope
have
not.
the House. And there's multiple reasons to impeach him right away. There's a credible sexual
Bonnie.
What about Donald Trump?
Bonnie, we're not going to go down the Biden impeachment trail. So please, don't start that. Don't get me started.
Republicans, they know better. Republicans would not do that. They saw what a sham it was on the Democrats. They're not going to do that. They're going to be busy cleaning up the pandemic.
Bonnie, thanks for your call. Let's go to Mike listening to us in Spokane. Go ahead, Mike, on KXLY. Right.
Oh.
We certainly can. Go ahead. What do you think we should do to China, Mike? Okay.
Why should we make Americans pay? That's exactly what tariffs will do. It'll cost Americans money. It won't make a difference to China. It will not. That's not how tariffs work.
Go ahead, Eric, explain it.
That's not how tariffs work. So tariffs are money that are charged to American consumers purchasing foreign goods. So the idea that it's going to punish China by making Americans pay more money is just it's just not how it works. But I mean, it is how this administration seems to think it works. So it does seem to be a likely idea that they will pursue, but it is just not actually something that will actually punish China. I'm not actually 100% not sure exactly what we should do with regard to China. I mean, we have we do have a difficult relationship with them going forward, but we do have somewhat of an entanglement. And I'm willing to listen to suggestions of somewhat of an autarkic idea that we should move supply chains back here or supply chains elsewhere, and we should provide incentives to American businesses to do that. I'm open to that. But the idea that we should make Americans pay more money in order to theoretically punish China is a misunderstanding of how tariffs work. It has been the misunderstanding the Trump administration has been operating under from the beginning.
Okay, on that note, we have to pause. We've got to pause. We have to pause, everybody. The music is playing. That means the spots are getting ready to roll. From coast to coast and border to border, we've got three great guests this evening. They will come back and introduce themselves to the masses when Beyond the Beltway rolls on from beautiful Evanston, Illinois. Bruce DuMont back in Evanston, Illinois, from coast to coast and border to border and around the world at BeyondTheBeltway.com. And again, hopefully you're enjoying this program either on one of our many radio stations on Sirius XM Channel 124, POTUS Channel, or you're watching us on YouTube Live. We're back live on YouTube tonight and also continuing on Facebook Live. And we've got a lot of Facebook people calling in, suggestions. Sherry Calabro says she doesn't understand why Democrats love losers like Stacey Abrams. Mac Birch writes, how about Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan? And we're also hearing from Rick Cordoba, great television executive, retired from WTTW, and Doug Dunlap, and Larry Miller, and Roger Townhouse, and Jeff Gotland, and all. Those are just some of the people. It's nice to see some of the people that are actually tuning in and watching us. And by the way, I remind you that if you'd like to keep this program alive and well, we have a GoFundMe campaign that's going on, and we're doing very well. But you can either go to GoFundMe and look up Beyond the Beltway, or go to Beyond the Beltway, and on that homepage, you'll see the GoFundMe campaign. And again, it helps pay for the satellite costs in the studio, and the cost of doing this program has increased considerably since since the Museum of Broadcast Communications has closed its doors due to the stay-at-home order in the state of Illinois. So it's costing a little bit, but again, it's nice. Last week, after making my appeal on the air, it was nice to go home and read from a lot of the people who are listeners to this program, people that I don't know, but who are like this program, and they donated so much that tonight's program is already paid for. So that's nice to know. Let's take a moment to let each of our guests introduce themselves, and let's begin with a voice that we've given amplification to for quite some time. Mr. Addis, Derek Addis, tell us who you are and what you're up to.
Thanks. My name is Derek Addis. I'm a veteran, DePaul MBA. I'm a small business owner, Philomathy Digital Media Marketing. So I help small businesses grow primarily with a digital presence. I'm the host of The DA Perspective. It's a show that I just started to kind of find and facilitate a place for individuals that are kind of in my lane or other lanes to come hear a different perspective. And I believe communication can solve most of the problems facing humans today and the ones that are going to affect us in the future.
Okay. And where did you serve in the military?
In Iraq. I went to Iraq, yeah.
Okay. And Stephanie Hitt, go ahead.
I'm a conservative activist here in Evanston, and I'm a mother of 4 teenagers / college. I have 2 seniors this year, a senior in high school and a senior in college. So I am feeling the loss of graduations immensely. And I'm also a military mom. I have a daughter in the Air Force. And so thank you again, Derek, for your service. And, we think of all the military families and the ones that we've lost the most, their ultimate sacrifice this weekend. And I was a delegate, and I'm a lone voice in a very liberal world. Okay,
Eric Cohn, go ahead.
Along with Joe Kaiser, I host Sources with Knowledge, which airs on News Talk 560, The Answer in Chicago, now airing at 10 a.m. on Saturday, as well as 3 p.m. on Sunday. You can go to your friendly local podcast feed and search Sources with Knowledge if you want to find the show. My day job, I'm the Director of Communications and Marketing at the Acton Institute for the Study of Religion and Liberty, based out of Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Okay. If you look, when you talk about your life right now and how your life has been affected over the last couple of months, Derek, how has your life been affected, and how are you surviving in this world?
Yeah, so initially it was pretty intense, and it was intense not only because of what I was going through, but because of some of the people I was either already working with, or people who were looking for answers because they were in panic mode. And I think that's really what threw me off the most. I think fielding phone calls from people who were looking for help because their restaurant was closed and they just had no answers from their leadership from any level, and that really it made things very difficult. My business has only been in existence for a little over a year, because of my, I would just say, because of my financial planning style. I was able to kind of be a little better positioned to have some longevity, but it wouldn't have lasted long had I not eventually received some of the aid that was given out by the government.
And how much did you get, if I may ask?
Yeah, so I received the PPP. It was 2.5 months worth of what I grossed for the first year. Okay. So I'll make it hard for everyone. I made about $21,000 my first year.
Okay, very good. Stephanie, how has your life been affected?
Well, I have my two college kids are home, and then I have two teenage boys who are home all day. So I know how vampires live now. And I never realized how much people eat and go to the bathroom when we're all home. My husband is working from home. He's also an attorney. I'm a former attorney. He's an attorney working from home. I never felt like my house was so small, but we are one of the fortunate ones that we are able to work.
Have you had a conversation with your children and explained to them that the careers path that they are on may not end up successfully?
Interesting. You know, it's funny that you say that. We've talked a lot about not depending on other people and learning to, make your own way in the world. The other thing that we are, what's interesting is during this, right before my daughter was scheduled to graduate, which was canceled, she got a job. And she's working for a congresswoman in DC, so maybe her job. Maybe we shouldn't promote those jobs, but I would say that my daughter, who's in the Air Force, is feeling very proud and glad that she's going to be serving this country.
The way you're describing this, there doesn't appear to be a lot of hardship that you've gone through.
There is not hardship. There is change and frustration. Okay. We are, and which we can talk about the dichotomy that was alluded to a little bit by writers last week. How this affects different classes of people.
Yeah, I want to go over and talk with Eric to get his take on that, and then we'll come back to it. Eric, has your life been rocked by this, or are you sailing along rather smoothly?
Somewhere in between that, definitely not rocked. I'm able to thankfully work from home. I was a consultant that worked from home for about 5 years. So the idea of working from home was really second nature to me. What was different was having my wife and kids around. But we've managed to adapt to that. It has been difficult. I just started at the Acton Institute in January. So I'm leading a team of people that I only was able to spend some physical time with for about 2.5 months before we had to go completely remote and I wasn't able to travel anymore. But I would say the biggest impact has been the e-learning that my kids are doing. I have a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old, and it has been difficult. I mean, my 9-year-old is one of the most studious students I have ever come across. She was supposed to take the Aspire test, which replaced like the Prairie State Basic Skills test. It's the first standardized test that you take. She's such a good student. She was actually upset she wasn't going to get to take the test. Which I hope she continues with that kind of passion in life. That was not the kind of student that I was. But adapting to that world of e-learning has probably been the most difficult part, but I'm far from a person who's had it hard throughout this whole experience.
Derek, back to you. You mentioned that you received some fiscal support from the government. Is that something that you and your generation of recipients, I don't just mean age-wise, but your generation of recipients for this fund, is this something they're going to expect in the future, that this is the die has now been cast, that if things aren't better in 6 months, you're going to be able to go back to the well one more time, and if the virus comes back, you could go back to them next year? Are you worried that, or thinking about that, maybe you can tap this well one more time or two more times?
Yeah, well, to answer that, you have to look at the reason why they gave everyone money in the first place. It was to prop up the system, the economic system that they have now. They're not worried about most people on the ground level. They're not worried about me, basically. What they're worried about is the larger economy crashing, either the stock market or another mortgage collapse, or we have 9-year car loans now. So what is happening right now with everyone not having money to make those payments? So if these people want to stay in power and keep their, backdoor loopholes in tax code and all that stuff to stay afloat, then if the people need it in 6 months because the virus comes back during normal flu season, if it takes another printing of money to give to everyone else, then I think it's more of a necessity as opposed to a want.
Can I just point out that I think there was a fundamental mistake that was made in the way that we approached the aid and the kind of the fits and starts that we went through. I think the PPP is probably the most defensible program that we have, but I think there was a fundamental error that was made in not doing what I believe the Brits did, which was to have the government back private payrolls basically for as long as they possibly could. The idea of keeping people attached to their employment and funding employers to keep them attached to their employment would have made a lot more sense than sending people $1,200 checks once and then having to come back for Congress to consider spending another $3 or $8 trillion or whatever we're up to now. It almost seems like monopoly money. I think that was a fundamental error that was made in a policy decision.
Yeah, and also
I would agree with Eric on that, because the whole idea was this was supposed to be temporary. This is going to be, the shutdown was supposed to only be 3 or 4 weeks to get us to a point where we could then long-term figure out how we're going to deal with this. And so long-term figuring out how we're going to deal with this doesn't mean keep opening up coffers.
When we come back,
we're not going to be able to do that.
I want you to follow up on that. Stephanie, we do have to pause. 1-800-723-8289 from coast to coast and border to border. I'm Bruce DuMont. Thanks for joining us on Beyond the Beltway. Bruce DuMont back. We continue. Mike Richardson and the ever popular Ron Culp are watching us tonight. Longtime friends, certainly Mr. Culp is. Let's go back to our discussion, and I want to begin with what the future might look like. Stephanie, you were talking about the initial idea of the support from the government. It was supposed to be temporary, and as far as we know, it is going to be temporary. But again, we don't quite know yet whether or not the economy is going to take off. I mean, some states are now open now or partially open. It's going to be several months before we know whether we're on the right track economically, is it not?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think because the phasing is very, very, it's built to be slow. It's not like we're going to just open the faucet and everybody's out there. We're going to go to 25% capacity at restaurants, 50%. So even if you want to go out there and do and spend money and do things, you're going to be still somewhat limited. It's funny. I was talking with my husband about this. We think that the world is sort of in threes. There's a third of the population that can't wait to get out. We're going to get out. We're going to go to the restaurants. We're ready to go, just live life, whatever. Mm-hmm. There's another third that's no way. No, there's going to be a good third of this population that is just not going to run out there. They're not going to take the masks off. They're not going to test the waters for a long time. And then there's that sort of fuzzy middle that's willing to just do it slowly and wait and see. But I think that we're looking at least a third less economic activity.
Do you agree with that, Derek? And is the third that Stephanie is talking about, are they all senior citizens or primarily senior citizens?
No.
I think it runs the gamut, and I can only speak to who I've actually spoken to. I can say a seasoned individual in my family whom I love probably the most out of many people, has said that they are going to stay inside until at least, like, I believe August or September. And that was their choice when everyone else in the community, to include other family members, are making alternate choices with wearing a mask or staying secluded or whatever the case may be. So, but obviously I could understand how older individuals would want to take a little bit of precaution into their own hands and be more isolated than others feel comfortable with doing.
What about those in your family, extended family, Eric? Is there that same type of generational indifference towards this pandemic?
I have people in my family who have those underlying complicating health factors. So for people like that, yeah, I mean, yes, staying away from people and staying inside is probably going to be a necessity for, my family. I think we are kind of hankering to be able to get out of the house. We went out for a walk today. It was very, very nice. Love to be able to, go out to a restaurant again, even if it's at lower capacity. I think that would be great. But yeah, we're going to see how people are going to react to the ability to go out. But I was saying during the break that, we had a beautiful day in Chicago today. The weather was fantastic. There were a lot more people out than I'd seen before. And I've been saying for more than a month, as soon as we start getting nice weather on a regular basis, stay-at-home orders are going to end whether or not public officials rescind them.
Right.
People are going to want to get out of the house, and especially I think with the news that we're seeing, where as testing has started to increase, we are seeing more cases diagnosed, but they're not climbing at the rate you would expect to see with the increased testing. So I think it is going to encourage more and more people to start leaving their caves and going out into the sunny world.
Do you think?
And I don't think it's just older people that are that want to stay in, or people with compromise. I've been surprised in talking with people that of all ages, maybe in their 30s, 40s, 50s, that don't necessarily have conditions themselves, but they basically decided they don't want to be part of a problem, and they don't want to they don't want to cause risk, and they don't want to be, at fault for anything. So I don't think it's just our older population that is going to be. And to be honest, I've heard a lot of older people say, I've lived 80 years, 90 years. I'm going to live my life. I'm not going to spend the last years of my life hiding behind a mask. I've lived through everything else. So I've heard it both ways. So here's where I think it's important
for us to remember. Why are we doing this in the first place? The reason was to flatten the curve, and flattening the curve had to do with making sure that our medical and health resources were not overwhelmed. They have not been overwhelmed. The field hospital at McCormick Place closed with only seeing a couple of people there. There was a field hospital in New York that closed without seeing anyone. The USS Comfort that went there did not have a lot of patients. We have not had our medical resources overwhelmed. There are some people who seem to be these kind of shelter-in-place fetishists who forget that was the reason for what we are doing. So if we're not overwhelming our medical resources, with the exception of people who have that higher risk for if they get COVID-19 because of underlying health conditions, they're at a greater risk, they maybe should stay sheltered in place for a longer period of time and take greater precautions. But for the rest of the population, I think it's time to rethink why we're doing this, and it's why we're starting to see these shelter-in-place.
Do you think? But let me just to follow up. Do you think that's a significant softness in the appeal of the president? Because again, it's the CDC and it's Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx. I mean, they seem to be leading the chorus on this, that stay at home is still the best thing to do.
They are meant to make recommendations that medical and health officials are meant to make, and politicians are supposed to weigh all of the options and all of the concerns that they have. And we have had fundamentally a failure of political leadership, in my opinion, from the president down to a lot of state governors, down to a lot of other people, to actually weigh those concerns in a reasonable manner.
That's why we need more data scientists in our government.
More data scientists in our government.
And we need less arbitrary lines drawn.
Okay, and on that note, we have to say farewell to our guest, Eric Addis. Thank you very much. Eric Cohn, thank you very much. Stephanie Yed, Always a pleasure to be with you. Our thanks to Andrew Marshall for his assistance in the production of this program. I'm Bruce DuMont again. Don't forget, the purpose tomorrow is Memorial Day. Take a moment, remember those that gave their lives in service to this country. I'm Bruce DuMont. Good night from Evanston, Illinois.